Okay, hello everyone. So this week's parsha we have very, very fascinating concepts. And I think maybe very, very important yesodis, which now that I'm thinking about them, Be'etzem are really flowing from kind of the idea that we spoke about last week about Hanukkah, but in a slightly different way. And then hopefully you'll be able to get an interesting understanding over here. So, Parsha starts off, Vayigash Elev Yehuda. So, we know that the context of the story is that Yosef is taking Binyamin, and now Yehuda is coming up to him, and he's basically saying that, he insists on getting Binyamin back. And so, essentially, Chazal tells us on Vayigash, although I don't see it here in this Rashi, but it's in many Chazals, that Vayigash means three things. It means Melchama, war, pius, appeasing, and it also means tefillah, davening. So, I guess the shali really is, what exactly is the underlying construct which includes all of those different ideas, meaning, tefillah here. This is where it is. Hagash al-machama, hagash al-pius, and hagash al-tefillah. So, all of those things are included in what Yehuda was doing here. And the question is, what is the concept taka of hagasha? Right? Meaning, what does it mean to be nigash? What does that mean? That you're nigash to something, and it includes that you're davening about it, you are fighting it, and then you're also being Matthias, right? And you could ask, what is the underlying construct, stam, to find the common denominator in the word vayigash, what is the concept? But Viter, it seems to be that pius and mechama are opposites. So how can they both exist in vayigash? Meaning, pius means, I'm appeasing you. It even sounds the same as the word, pius, appeasing. It even sounds similar, right? But that's what it means. That's translation. So, I'm appeasing you. And then machama means I'm fighting you. So, how is it that I'm fighting you and appeasing you and that's the same exact word? Okay. Then, we have a very interesting idea in getting an understanding here of this episode, where Chazal have a fascinating perspective on what's happening here, and they say like this: Ki hine malachim na'adu over Yachdav. He says, Ki hine malachim ze Yehuda v'Yosef over Yachdav zenis mal evra zeh v'zenis mal evra zeh. So, essentially, what the Chazal are viewing this, they say that the Shvatim saw Amru malachim medainim elu im elu. So they saw that the two kings were dying with each other, both Yehuda and Yosef. So he says, so they butted out of it, essentially, right? So the shaila, I guess that's answering the kasha of why weren't any other shvatim involved, right? So that's the first thing that really needs a good hesber, which is that Chazal view this episode as a significant moment in the shaping of the history of Klal Yisrael, in terms of the coming together of Yehuda and Yosef as Shvatim. And not only do they view this as an integral piece of history and piece of Jewish identity formation, this episode, but they actually say that whatever this started, this Yehuda and Yosef, is actually going to be, this combination is going to be one of the facilitators for Yemos Mashiach, right? This is where they bring on here, Vegash Ev Yehuda, Hinayam Ba'num Hashem, Benigash Charesh, Charesh Yehuda, Bekotzer Ze Yosef, right? So, that's talking about the pasuk in Amos, and the pasuk in Amos is basically referring to Yemos Mashiach. So it seems to be, and this is a very Davi Yadua, that there's going to be a Mashiach ben Yosef and a Mashiach ben Yehuda, who ultimately will be the last Mashiach. But the concept is clear that there's essentially two driving forces within Israel, within the Jewish people, and one of them is Yehuda, and one of them is Ephraim, or Yisrael. And you see this very, very clearly in Jewish history, because we know that when Shlomo HaMelech, there's a lot of different reasons, but when the Malchus of David HaMelech splits up, which is the main thrust of Yehuda and of his Malchus, it splits up into the 10 Shvatim, and then Yehuda and Binyamin, which is also not a coincidence that Yehuda and Binyamin they stayed together throughout all of Jewish history, till this day, which is why there's still people from Binyamin around, but not the rest of the Shvatim, because only Yehuda and Binyamin are left from the exiles that we know of. So the point is that, and that's taka because of this, meaning because Yehuda is now basically being meiser himself for the sake of Binyamin. But that's a different discussion. The point is like this. The point is that we have to understand, that Chazal are essentially viewing this as a monumental kind of event that happened in terms of the formation of Klal Yisrael and how it runs and how it works. And we have to understand what it is, right? Meaning we're saying that Yehuda is a melech, Yosef is a melech. So what does that mean that they're both melachim? What do they each represent as melachim? And how is their coming together, a very, a fix to something? Okay, that is the main shaila. Now, in order to answer the question, it is, I think, we go over here and we look at Yehuda. We examine Yehuda. And Yehuda basically says that his name, why was his name Yehuda? It says over here that Leah gave birth. This time, I will, simply speaking, praise God. Yehuda. That's why he named his Yehuda, because Leah admitted, quote unquote, she praised God because when she had Yehuda. Okay, now Rashi says something, and it's a please the Rashi. Rashi says, "Apam oide, shenatalti yoser michalki." I've taken more than my share. So what does that mean? Yehuda was Leah's fourth child. Chazal say that the most knew that Yaakov was going to have 4 wives, and there's going to be 12 shvatim. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. So therefore, Leah, as one of the wives, is only entitled, so to speak, to 3 children. So the fact that she now has a 4th child is more than her share. And therefore, because she now has more shvatim than her share, she's ma'ata yesh l'hodos. Now I have what to be moda. Now, this Rashi is a pleiistic Rashi, and very counterintuitive. And we're all told that obviously you have to be moda on every little thing, and no matter how small it is, no matter how much you take it for granted, and that all that is true, right? So, we say moedan lefanecha shechazar timinish masi, so it's like, well, what's pshat in this Rashi? Rashi is saying that it's only after I get more than I'm supposed to get that I start thinking HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara in Brachos has a whole different. The Gemara in Brachos says that Leah was the only first one in all of human history that was moedeh. And it's a place the Gemara in Brachos. It's very, very schwer. Very, very schwer. What does that mean? Here you go. The Gemara in Brachos. Miyom shebar HaKadosh Baruch Hu esay lamai lahaya adam shahayda HaKadosh Baruch Hu ache bas Leah v'hidatu shenemar hapam moedeh es Hashem. The Pliya. Most Chazal hold that Adam and Rishon wrote Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos, and there it says Tov L'Hodeis in Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos. So you already have a problem, but there's many, many problems. Avram was moed. It's very schwer. So, but still, the mechanism seems to be very anti what we think of the concept as Zaidah, because you have to be moed even for your own chelik, even for the chelik you're supposed to get. So what's pshat in that? And then once you get pshat in that, then we can understand the basis for Yehuda. So I think, really, in order to say the pshat, what we basically have to understand is the following construct, which is that we discussed about Yosef last week, but now we're going to explore more the nature of Yehuda, and we'll see how it fits. Last week we spoke about the nature of, the Yavan story, and we said that Yosef was the shor, and they told him to write on the horn of the shor that they don't have a chelek. We spoke about the nature of Yosef as the dreamer, the one who has the chaloim. And essentially, what we established was the following thing, was that Yosef was, and always will be, the vitality, the essence, or not the essence, but the part of Yisrael which allows it to keep its integrity and genuineness. That's what Yosef is and will always be. And the reason for that is because Yosef is really an extension of Yaakov. And Yaakov was initially not the name Yisrael, but Yaakov is Baba Akev. Yaakov's the word Akev, which means heel, which means that he comes from behind. He's not in the front, he's not in the showing, he's not a sar like Yisrael, but rather he comes from behind. And Yosef represented that. And what does that mean, he comes from behind by Akev? In terms of the way that it comes out by Yosef, what that means essentially is that although we understand that Yosef was the melech, but he was the melech of Mitzrayim, meaning that he was the same way he would have done that for Yaakov, he did that for Paro, meaning he was the Av to Paro, so he was the melech, practically speaking, and this makes a huge difference, the external aspect, and we spoke about this by Yitzchak Avinu with Esav and the Din, and it ties back into all of that, but the externality of Yosef was that he was the Melech of Mitzrayim, which means that although Yosef was the Melech, his Malchus was through a different nation other than Yisrael. So, which means that Yosef has the internal necessary requirements for a malchus, but not the external ones. And we're going to explain what that means. And really what that means is, it really means the following. It really is the taich of the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael in general. So, we know, and we spoke about this, that Yaakov was the Ishtam, and that Rachel, who was the wife, she was the shidduch of Yaakov, and this is brought down in Midrashim, that Rachel was the initial shidduch for Yaakov. So the children that comes from Rachel are going to be the ones that are the epitome of what Yaakov was. Then you have Yaakov as Yisrael. And Yaakov as Yisrael is bought out by Leah, because it's bought in the Medrash that Leah was supposed to be the shidduch for Esav, which is why it says Einei Leah Rakos, that her eyes were very soft, because she was crying because she thought she was going to go to Esav. And so, essentially, and this is pshat in that she was snua, so, but it gets very complicated. But the essential pshat is that Leah was the yetzanes. She was someone who went out. She was very outward. She was overt. She was overt, and we see them. She was overt in the story with Yisachar, how when Rachel got the dudayim, the flowers, she went out towards Yaakov, the pasuk says, and she said, Yaakov, you're going to sleep with me tonight. I mean, it's right. It's very hard. It's very interesting to understand what the mechanism is, but that's what you see, that Leah was meant to be the shidduch of, Esav, and Esav was the epitome of overtness, which we talked about in terms of din. And Leah was that as well. That's because she was meant to be the shidduch of Esav. But the thing is, Yaakov married her. And so essentially, what ends up happening is that Yisrael operates on two continuums. There is Yaakov, and that is a continuous operation. And then there is Yisrael, which was essentially the combination of, it's like the fusion of Yaakov and what Esav was supposed to have been. which is the Ish Yodeh outside Ish Sadeh. He was the guy who was able to go out there and get things done and do things. He was the Gibor. He wasn't Yoshev Halim. He was the man. And so, what the maskan of what we have essentially is that the role of Yehuda versus Yosef is that Yehuda is meant to be, and he is, the Yotzei, the one that goes out, the overt one. Now, what does that mean, the Yotzei? It really means two things. The first thing that it means is that he is essentially in charge of the progress of Jewish history, right? To continuously forward it, to go forward, to go out, meaning, because essentially if you're always inside in your own, in a tent, then that's synonymous with being static in terms of development. Because in order for anyone to develop, it always requires interaction with the outside world, and therefore essential development requires Yetzia, and therefore Yetzia means that Yehuda is in charge of development. And we find that David was the person who accomplished, he basically created, laid all the blueprints and made everything for the Beis HaMikdash, which was the single biggest act of development for the Jewish people, after many, many hundreds of years. And Ezra, Sefer, Yehuda is always reoccurring whenever it comes to developmental idea, whenever Jewish people are going on to the next level, whether it's by Sheni or Rishon, etc. And obviously Mashiach. So essentially, that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that Yehuda is the epitome of Yisrael, which means he's really in charge of the Yisrael aspect, which is the Sarkel, which is the overt, the external, the showy aspect of what Yisrael is. And Shimon and Levi also had a chilek in that, obviously with all the Shvatim, but the essence of the overtness of the Jewish people is Yehuda, which is why the Medrash says that, it says over here, right here, the Medrash says, so when we think in our minds, it's so pashut that Yehudi is a Jew, that we don't even realize that Yehudi is Yehuda, and that even though Yisrael is really the name of the Jewish people, the Jews nowadays, and even the Medrash is saying that Yaakov was telling him that people will be called Yehudim, which is individuals that came from Yehuda, which is our exact point, that Yehuda is encompassing of all the Jewish people in terms of the externality of what they are, which is the din aspect, which is we covered with Esav and Yitzchak. And therefore they're called, when people perceive them, they perceive them as Yehudim, people from the tribe of Yehuda. And what that means is that, at least on the external level, Yehuda represents and is everything that we, as the Jewish people as a whole, want others to see about us. So that is the essential side of it. And in order to understand how the interrelationship between Yehuda and Yosef works, and therefore what the Vayigash really is, what we have to realize is the following concept. And this is B'Shem Matis Weinberg Shlita. And he basically says that very, very, very deep aside. And this is where it comes into what we spoke about on Hanukkah. So the kasha was that Yehuda's name is Yehuda because now Leah got more than she was supposed to get. But don't you have to be thankful even for what you are supposed to get? Meaning, even if it's coming to you, Lamaisa, you have to be thankful for it. Or the other way to ask it is, nothing is coming to you. So the way that this was answered, and it's a brilliant side, is the following: is that the concept of Haida'ah, which we're talking about in terms of Yehuda, is not the idea that one appreciates the physicality of life and of the things that he has. That is not Haida'ah. That is not Haida'ah at all. That's not the pshat of Haida'ah. That's not the pshat. That's just, you're grateful. You're makir toiv. The hakaras toiv is not the same thing as Haida'ah. Those are two different things. What's Haida'ah? Haida'ah is the realization that the only reason that I have anything is so that I can be moide. Which means the following thing. We think about life in terms of the idea that we go through life, and then when good things happen to us, we're thankful, and bad things happen, we say Baruch Adonai Emes, of course, and that's what it's about. That's what's going on. And so what we don't realize is that it's not pshat that we're thankful for things that happen to us, and the ikr is that it happened to us, and once a good thing happened to us, therefore we're thankful for it. The way that a Jewish person lives his life is that he realizes that the physicality of events is actually irrelevant, and it's only in terms of what it gives opportunity to be moeded to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the physicality of the events is occurring. So this is a bit of a teeth concept. I mean, it's like this. When we perceive the world, we perceive the physicality of the world as being the ikr. And therefore, when good things happen to us, we're thankful. What thankful means we're makir toiv. That's all it means. We have a karas toiv, which is wonderful. It's a lovely, good midah. Something good happened to you. You're makir toiv, which means what? You acknowledge the goodness of the physicality of the thing that occurred to you. Haida'ah doesn't mean that. Haida'ah means that I am thankful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm admitting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that all of the physicality itself is nothing, and it's only an opportunity to relate to Him that those things even have significance. So the physicality is actually only a hechid timtza to generate the emotions, and the ikr is the idea that now I have what to be thankful for. So the aside is like this. The aside of Haida'ah is of a Yid and how he looks at the world, the Yehudi, is that he examines and looks at life as a series of opportunities to be moeded to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means to acknowledge His existence and to have a relationship with Him. And that's all it is. That's the ikr. The way that life runs in terms of the physical aspects of it is only a hechetimsa to that thing. But essentially, it's a whole different pair of glasses looking at the world. In your world, how do you look at it? Do you look at it as, I'm in a world, in a physical world, the physicality of it is what matters, and when God does something good physical for me, I acknowledge the goodness that God gave to me, and shkoyach, thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, appreciate it, very nice, shkoyach. That's not Haida'ah. Haida'ah comes from the lashon of moideh. When you're admitting something, what does that mean? What that means is that you're acknowledging that the metzias of what you are is only so that you can have the opportunity to relate to Him. That's why it's Haida'ah. That's why you're being moideh. Say thanks to someone. This is what it would be like in terms of relationships. And people actually have this problem in relationships a lot. If I want a relationship with you, then I give you something within the structure of a relationship. If you have the need to give back to me, then that is a destruction of the relationship. Meaning like this, when people say thank you, usually what they're doing is they're discharging the either the feeling of the societal, mannerism. So you're saying you do something a favor for someone, and they say, "Oh, thank you so much, I appreciate it." So now, what do they essentially do? They disconnect themselves from you, because what happened? You did something for them, then they felt in debt to you, and because they felt in debt to you, they needed to discharge that debt. And if it wasn't, if it wasn't money, whatever it is, they say, "Oh, thank you so much, appreciate it." And now they've discharged their connection to you, which means that in their thank you, it's the opposite of what real thank you is. Because when they say thank you, they're trying to get away from you. When you're moideh, it's not saying thank you, it is, I acknowledge that you comprise a vital part of the reality of what I am, and therefore I admit that I am in need of you. on a consistent basis. That is the taich of Haida'ah. If you would have Haida'ah for another person, you wouldn't say, "Oh, thanks so much, appreciate what you did it for me." You would say, "I acknowledge that you care about me and you're in my life, and this is just an act of you showing that you care about me and you want to relate to me. Now let's have a relationship." The Haida'ah is a deepening of the relationship, not a method through which you're trying to exempt yourself from feeling guilty about having taken something. You just say, "Oh, thanks so much, appreciate it." It's actually the opposite of that. And that only comes in when you get yoiser michalki. That only comes in when you get yoiser michalki. Because that is when you realize that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for you, He didn't do it for you so that you can appreciate what it is that you are, what is coming to you, or what you need. He's doing it for you for another reason than that, because you already got your chelik. Why is He doing it for you? Elamai, it must be that the whole side is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to relate to Him, to be in debt to Him. And therefore, that is the true taich of Haida'ah. And it is therefore not a coincidence that we find that the time where Yehuda was Maida, right, we find in the Medrash by Vayechi, it says over here like this, it says, Yehuda ata yoducha achecha, same lashon, Haida, yoducha. So, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Yehuda, ata hoideis v'maisa samar. Right? You admitted in the Maisa of Samar, Yoducha Achecha Lios Melech Aleim. Right? That's what it says. So, what happened? He was Maida in Maisa Samar. In the Maisa Samar, she has the kids from him, and he's about to stone her for doing something wrong. He's in public, and then she says, Liisha Asher Eila Loya Anechi Hara. She says, whoever these things that I have in my hand belong to, that's who I'm pregnant from. And then he acknowledges that she's right in public. What is the pshat of that? Now, okay, he's willing to go through the embarrassment and willing to admit he was right. But that's not the depth of the taich. The depth of the taich of Yeducha is, what does it say about the pasuk? It says, Hakirna, it says tzedakah mimeni. So, simply speaking, the way that it's read is that she's more righteous than me. That's the Pashup Shah of the reading. But Rashi says that tzedakah mimeni is the acknowledgement that the babies of Tamar were from him, and on a deeper level, what that means is that Yehuda was able to acknowledge that Tamar was, and the kids were a chelik of him. And therefore the concept is the same concept. In other words, when I am willing to admit that I am wrong in public, and I'm able to be moida, that is because I realize that the significance of my own honesty is more important than the reality of what's occurring. So the fact that I'm going to be embarrassed is not worth me not being who I am. And therefore, I'm moide. Since the whole yesod of Haida'ah is that the person looks at life as a series of opportunities for him to have self-expression, for him to form himself in a certain way. Right? Meaning that's really the most underlying yesod. The underlying yesod is that when you think about Haida'ah, what you're realizing is that the things in your life and the events in your life are not important because they're important, because it matters physically what happens or doesn't happen. They're only important because they give a hechi timtza for you to be able to develop and express yourself in a specific manner, which is why it's only hoda after et yaisa michalki. And therefore, when you understand that life is not about the events are good or bad for you in terms of you as the physical body that you are in this world, because that anyway is very temporary and not so relevant, but rather events are only meaningful in terms of the fact that they give context and ability for you to be moided, for you to express your relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a deeper and more significant or different type of way. So all of life's events and circumstances and challenges become opportunities for you to deepen your connection to God and to acknowledge Him in your life. That's the side of Haidah. And therefore, Yehuda, who had this Yesod, and what this was the Yesod of his name, when it came to it, he lived up to his name, and he did the Haidah, even though the event was terrible, and it was very embarrassing for him, as the Sheni Lamelech in Mitzrayim, in Canaan, he still did it. He still did it in front of everybody because he understood that the embarrassment that he felt as a result of the Haidah was an opportunity through which he will further connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that was the right thing. That was the tzedek. And therefore, that is the koyach of Yehuda. And we see over here by Rus, and this is by Boaz, when David is born, you see something fascinating. It says that the Zkanim said that the baby should come from V'hibes Chakives Peretz, right? And then it says so they put Rachel before Leah. So Rashi says, Yehuda, even though obviously Boaz was Yehuda, David came from Yehuda, Mibnei Leah, they're sons of Leah, Moidim Haim, there's the key word, Moidim Haim, al Rachel Shahisi Kar Shabayas, V'gdimu Rachel Leah. They were Moide, that Rachel is the Kar Shabayas, and they were Makdim Rachel Leah. That is our whole taich.